Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Stuck in a taxi on a deserted road, a woman, bored, listened to a random fellow passenger's story about her lover. But when she began to suspect the story was about her own husband, she held her breath, and when the woman asked the driver to stop near her country house, she turned pale. Hello, dear listeners. Leave a comment telling us where you're tuning in from, and I'll begin a new story. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. The morning sun streamed through the snowy white bedroom curtains, bathing the room in soft golden hues. Carla slowly opened her eyes, feeling that special anticipation she always experienced before visiting her husband at their country house. Diego had gone there back on Wednesday, claiming an important project required complete focus far from the city's distractions. Creativity can't stand the hustle, he liked to say, and Carla always understood his need for solitude. She stretched, savoring the rare luxury of waking up without an alarm. Fridays were her short days at work, and her boss had let everyone go early, wishing them a good weekend. How wonderful it was to finally have a full 2 days to spend with her beloved husband away from endless calls, meetings, and reports. Carla got out of bed and walked to the window. Outside was the familiar urban view, gray high-rises, hurried pedestrians, an endless stream of cars. How she longed to be in the countryside, where the air smelled of Mediterranean pines and mountain herbs, where she could sit on the terrace for hours, listening to birdsong and watching the sun set behind the hills. She imagined Diego greeting her at the gate, hugging her tightly, melting away all the week's stress in his arms. Maybe they'd cook dinner together over an open fire, then sit under the stars, making plans for the future. Carla smiled dreamily at the idyllic image. After a quick wash and getting herself ready, she began to pack. Into her bag went a light dress for walks, comfortable jeans, a cozy sweater in case of a cool evening. She carefully folded the beautiful lingerie Diego had given her for her birthday, saying it matched her eyes. Let this weekend be special, romantic, just like the early days of their relationship. A glance at the clock told her it was time to leave. She grabbed her car keys and headed for the door, only for her plans to collapse unexpectedly. Her car, the reliable companion with which they traveled half the country, refused to start. The starter turned, the engine coughed and sputtered, but never came to life. Of course. Today, of all days, Carla muttered, feeling a wave of irritation rise inside her. She tried again and again, but the result was the same. A look at the time confirmed it. If she waited for a tow truck and mechanic, she'd reach the country house only by evening, if not tomorrow. The solution came naturally, a taxi. It would be a long ride and certainly not cheap, but how could money compare to spending a few extra hours with the man she loved? Carla quickly called the taxi service, explained the route, and half an hour later she was standing outside her building, waiting for the car. The arriving taxi was not new, but clean and tidy. Behind the wheel sat a middle-aged man with a kind face and sharp eyes. He introduced himself as Jose, and after hearing the destination, whistled softly. "That's quite a trip, señorita. But no worries, we'll get there. Not my first time. Just warning you, the road's not the best, especially if it starts raining. They're predicting a storm by noon," he said, helping Carla settle into the back seat. Carla nodded, getting comfortable. She liked riding in the back. She could gaze out the window, get lost in her thoughts, without focusing on the road. The car rolled away smoothly, and the city streets flowed past the window, gradually giving way to suburban neighborhoods. They had just left the city limits when Jose slowed down at a bus stop. There stood a young woman with a large bag, clearly waiting for someone. When she saw the taxi, she raised her hand and looked questioningly at the driver. "Got a hitchhiker," Jose said, lowering the window. "Where you headed, miss?" "Toward Pinars," the stranger answered brightly. "Need to get to the Oliva settlement. The bus broke down, and the next one's not for 3 hours." Carla quickly did the math in her head. Oliva was practically on the way, only 5 kilometers from their country house. She nodded to Jose to show she didn't mind the extra passenger. After all, it was a long road, and some company wouldn't hurt. The woman smiled gratefully and settled beside Carla. She looked about 28-30 years old, with bright red hair styled fashionably, and her outfit clearly aimed for elegance. A designer bag, stylish heels, and the soft scent of expensive perfume, everything about her said she knew how to look good and enjoyed doing so. "Laura," she introduced herself, extending a hand with a flawless manicure. "Carla," she replied, involuntarily comparing her own modestly trimmed nails to the works of art on her fellow passenger's hands. The first half hour of the ride passed in typical small talk. Laura turned out to be sociable and open, happily sharing details about her life. She worked as a receptionist at a beauty salon, rented a small apartment downtown, loved traveling, but for now, her budget only allowed for regional trips. "What brings you out this way?" Laura asked, studying Carla closely. "Going to see my husband. He's working at our country house, finishing up an important project," Carla replied, and a hint of pride slipped into her voice. She liked talking about Diego, about his work, about how driven and talented he was. "Oh, how romantic. A secret retreat for two," Laura sighed dreamily. "I'm on my way to see my man too. Not my husband yet, but..." She smiled meaningfully and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Carla gave a polite smile in return, not particularly interested in the stranger's personal life. Outside, familiar landscapes flashed by: olive groves, vineyards, small villages with white houses and terracotta roofs. Nature was bracing for a storm. The leaves rustled strangely despite the lack of wind, and the air carried a heavy tension. "You know, I'm really lucky in love," Laura suddenly continued, clearly not ready to let the conversation drop. "I've been seeing a man for 6 months now. A real prince, let me tell you. Handsome, smart, attentive, like something out of a fairy tale." Carla nodded, still watching the passing scenery. She didn't feel like getting involved in someone else's romance, but Laura clearly needed a listener. "He's so thoughtful," the woman went on, clearly caught up in the telling. "Can you believe he always remembers that I love white roses? And not just any bouquet, he finds the most beautiful ones, with long stems. And recently he gave me these earrings," she said, touching the delicate jewelry in her ears. "Said they bring out the color of my eyes." Something twisted in Carla's chest. White roses. Diego always gave her white roses too, saying they suited her fair hair. And he had recently given her earrings also, with a comment about her eye color. But surely that was just a coincidence. Men weren't exactly original when it came to gifts. "How long have you known each other?" Carla asked, surprised at her own sudden interest. 6 months, like I said. We met by chance, in a cafe. He was sitting at the next table, working on some papers. I accidentally knocked over the sugar bowl. It spilled everywhere. He was so gallant, helping me clean it up. Laura laughed at the memory. Then he asked if I wanted to have coffee together. And well, the rest is history. Jose turned on the radio, and a soft melody filled the cab. The scenery outside grew more rural, tall grass swaying in waves under the pre-storm wind. "And where does he work?" Carla asked, not understanding herself why she was continuing the conversation. "An architecture firm. He's a designer, works on all sorts of projects," Laura replied. "Very artistic type, you know? Says he needs peace and quiet to be inspired, so he often retreats to the countryside. He has some kind of studio in the mountains." Carla felt a tightness in her chest. Diego was also a designer. Also spoke of needing silence and solitude. But it couldn't be. Too many coincidences just don't happen. "What's his name?" The question slipped out before Carla could stop herself. "Why do you ask?" Laura suddenly looked wary, as if sensing something behind the seemingly innocent question. "Oh, just curious. Maybe I know him," Carla said quickly, trying to sound casual. Laura hesitated, eyeing Carla, then shrugged. "His name's Diego." "Why?" The world around Carla seemed to tilt. The name hit her like a hammer. Diego. Architect. Studio in the countryside. White roses and earrings with comments about eye color. No, it couldn't be true. It had to be an unbelievable coincidence. There were millions of Diegos in the world, and many of them were designers. "Carla, are you all right?" Laura asked with concern. "You've gone pale." "I'm fine," Carla managed to say, trying to steady herself. "Just got a little hot, that's all." Jose, overhearing, turned up the air conditioning. Outside, the sky was indeed growing heavy. The clouds thickened, and the air had taken on that unique, oppressive scent that always precedes a storm. "Yeah, the weather's turning," the driver remarked, glancing at the sky. "Good thing we'll make it before the storm hits. You don't want to be out on the road in weather like this." Meanwhile, Laura continued her story, oblivious to the state of the woman sitting beside her. "He's such an interesting conversationalist," she said dreamily. "He can talk for hours about his projects, about his vision of the perfect space. And he has this one little detail, a scar on his right arm, from his wrist to his elbow. He fell off a bike as a kid and had to go to the hospital. Says it reminds him to be more careful." Carla felt as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped over her. A scar on the right arm, from wrist to elbow. The bike accident in childhood. She knew that Scar by heart had kissed it 100 times, had heard the story of how 7-year-old Diego had taken a tumble down a hill and lost control. Her hands began to tremble. She clasped them tightly, trying not to betray her shock, but inside, everything was turning upside down. This couldn't be a coincidence. Too many details matched. Which meant Diego, her husband of 5 years, was cheating on her with this red-haired beauty. "Are you sure you're all right?" Laura asked again. "Want some water?" "No, thank you," Carla mumbled, turning toward the window. Outside, the familiar view stretched on, endless olive groves, vineyards, the occasional village. The same sights as an hour ago, and yet everything had changed. It was as if someone had shattered her safe, comfortable life like a fragile vase. Her thoughts about the upcoming reunion with her husband had completely shifted. How would she walk into the house? What would she say? How would she look him in the eye, knowing what she now knew? Or was she wrong? Could it still be some incredible coincidence? Was she simply losing her mind, overwhelmed by suspicion? "Oh look, it's starting to rain," Laura said, watching the first drops fall on the windshield. Jose turned on the wipers, which began ticking rhythmically like a metronome, measuring the seconds of a new, unfamiliar life Carla had unwillingly stepped into. The rain picked up, shifting from scattered drops to a full-on downpour. Visibility worsened, and Jose slowed down, peering through the curtain of rain. "What a day," he muttered. "At least it's not nighttime, or we wouldn't see a thing." Laura pulled a small mirror from her purse and began touching up her makeup, getting ready to meet her lover. Carla, meanwhile, sat motionless, staring at the streaks of rain that blurred the world outside into a distorted, unfocused painting. A message from Diego lit up her phone. "Can't wait to see you, love. Got a surprise for you." Carla stared at the words for a long time, each letter cutting into her heart. What surprise? And who was it really meant for? Road signs for familiar villages appeared ahead. They were getting close. Soon, she would have to decide what to do, what to say, whether she was even ready to face what lay ahead. The rain beat against the roof of the car like a ticking clock, counting down the final minutes of her old, peaceful life. The downpour grew heavier by the minute, turning the road into a watercolor of smeared grays and greens. Red brake lights suddenly blinked ahead, and Jose slowed, merging into a growing traffic jam. "Looks like an accident," he muttered, turning on the hazard lights. "We'll have to wait it out. No point rushing in this weather." Carla leaned back against the seat, oddly relieved. The unexpected stop gave her time to think, to process everything she'd just heard. Maybe she really was overreacting. Maybe this was just an unbelievable string of coincidences, and she was seeing patterns where none existed. Cars lined up around them, a fogged-up gray sedan with barely visible passengers, a red SUV covered in tourist stickers, an old car blaring loud music. Ordinary people going about their ordinary lives, unaware that someone's world was quietly crumbling next to them. The taxi's interior was filled with a blend of scents: Laura's expensive perfume, a lavender air freshener, the faint chemical trace of rain on asphalt. Carla breathed it in, realizing she would remember it forever: the smell of betrayal, the scent of broken illusions. Laura took out her mirror again, applying another touch of lipstick, clearly preparing for a romantic evening. This traffic jam couldn't have come at a worse time. She sighed, adding a layer of bold red to her lips. "Diego and I were supposed to go out to dinner tonight. He said he wanted to celebrate our 6-month anniversary in a special way." Carla's heart skipped a beat. 6 months ago. That was exactly when Diego had started working late more often, going on business trips. She chalked it up to a new project, to his career taking off. She remembered how proud she'd been of him, how happy she was that her husband was becoming a sought-after professional. And now it turned out he had been building another life, another love. "Anniversary?" Carla repeated, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Yes," Laura said with a dreamy smile, admiring her reflection. "We met 6 months ago. Feels like yesterday. I remember how he courted me flowers every day, phone calls 3 times a day. Such a romantic. Later he told me his job was stressful, and that his wife at home constantly nagged him, wouldn't let him focus." The last words hit like a slap in the face. Carla felt the blood drain from her cheeks. Nagging wife. That's how Diego spoke about her. About her, who had always supported him, helped him in everything, created a home filled with comfort and understanding. Her hands went cold, and a hollow sensation spread through her stomach. She clenched her fists, feeling her nails dig into her palms. The pain was almost welcome. It distracted her from the deeper ache rising from somewhere in her heart. "And what does he say about his wife?" The question slipped out before Carla could stop it. Laura looked at her with surprise, raising a perfectly plucked eyebrow. Why so interested in someone else's family matters? There was a hint of suspicion in her voice. Oh, nothing serious, Carla answered quickly, feeling her cheeks flush. I've always been interested in relationship psychology. Comes with the job. I work with people a lot. Laura shrugged, apparently deciding there was nothing odd about such curiosity, and continued with obvious pleasure. Well, what can he say? The usual story, married young, for love, and then realized they're completely different people. She's all uptight, boring. Everything with her is scheduled, planned. No romance at all. He says it's like living in a cage with her. And I totally get it. I like men who are creative, who need their freedom. The word cut like a blade. Carla remembered how she lovingly prepared Diego's breakfasts, how she planned their evenings together, how she made sure the house was quiet and cozy so he could focus on work. Did he really see all that as boring? Or had she really become too predictable? When was the last time they did something spontaneous or romantic? Each word from Laura landed like a whip. Uptight. She had always considered her organization and responsibility to be virtues. Diego himself used to say he admired her reliability, that he felt safe with her. And now it turned out that, deep down, he saw her care as suffocating control. Do they have any kids? Carla asked, her throat suddenly dry. Thank God, no, Laura said with a wave of her hand, snapping her mirror shut. He says his wife's sick or something, can't have children. Though honestly, maybe it's for the best. Why bring more misery into the world? When we get married, I'll give him a healthy baby. The world tilted. Sick? Can't have children? Yes, she and Diego hadn't been able to conceive yet, but the doctors had said there were no serious problems. It was just a matter of time and patience. And yet he'd gone around telling people she was defective, broken. Blood pounded in her temples. Carla remembered crying just a month ago after another negative test, and Diego holding her, comforting her, saying it was okay, they just needed to be patient. And all that time, he must have been secretly glad there were no children tying him to her. Jose turned up the radio slightly. An old love song played. How painfully out of place it felt now, as Carla's world fell apart. The lyrics mixed with the sound of rain and the murmur of engines, creating a chaotic hum that mirrored the storm inside her. Did he say he's going to marry you? Carla's voice trembled, though she hoped the other woman wouldn't notice. Of course, Laura exclaimed, her eyes lighting up like a child's on Christmas morning. He says he's just waiting for the right moment. His wife is kind of unstable, might do something drastic. He doesn't want a death on his conscience. Once he figures out how to divorce her gently, we're getting married right away. Carla closed her eyes, fighting back the tears. Unstable? Might do something drastic? That was monstrous. Not only was he cheating, he was also portraying her as mentally unwell just to justify his own cowardice. Do you two go out to restaurants often? Carla asked, her voice cracking, the words catching in her throat. Oh yes. Laura lit up even more. Almost every weekend. We even have a favorite table by the window, overlooking the fountain. Diego says the atmosphere there is magical. The waiters already know us. They bring cava without us even asking. Carla froze. The table by the window with the view of the fountain, that was where she and Diego had sat on her birthday 2 months ago. That was where he had told her how happy he was with her, how grateful he was for their love. And now it turned out that it wasn't their place, it was his and Laura's place. She had just been a guest there. Does he give you gifts? Carla asked, though she already knew the answer. Oh, absolutely. Laura beamed, touching her earrings. These, for example. He said they bring out the color of my eyes. He also gave me some perfume, French, really expensive. And this bag, she said, stroking the ivory leather purse. We're even planning a vacation together. Diego said he'll tell his wife it's a business trip. He wants to take me to Barcelona. He says the architecture there is so romantic. I've already picked out outfits. Barcelona? Carla remembered how 6 months ago Diego had mentioned a possible business trip to Catalonia. Back then, she'd even offered to go with him, to take time off together. But he said it would be all work, too dull for her. And now it turned out he had already been planning a romantic getaway with his mistress. Outside, the rain pounded harder on the roof, as if trying to break into the car and pour inside the pain that was tearing Carla apart. She stared at the droplets trailing down the glass, and it seemed like they were her own tears, the ones she hadn't yet allowed herself to shed. Are you married? Laura asked suddenly, eyeing Carla's wedding ring. Yes, Carla whispered, instinctively twisting the ring on her finger. And does your husband love you? Carla turned to the window, unsure what to say. Just that morning, she would have sworn that yes, he did love her. But now she wasn't sure of anything. Maybe he was telling someone else how boring and predictable she was. Probably, she said quietly. You're lucky, Laura sighed, adjusting her hair. I'm stuck dealing with a married man, though he promises it'll all be over soon. He says his wife's been unbearable lately, work issues, constant drama at home. He says he's at his limit. Drama? Carla thought back to the past few weeks. Yes, she had been tense, crisis at work, issues with suppliers, lack of sleep. A couple of times she had snapped at Diego for forgetting to take out the trash or leaving dirty dishes in the sink. But that was normal, wasn't it? That was life. Everyone gets frustrated sometimes. And yet here he was, turning her exhaustion and vulnerability into ammunition for complaints to his lover. And what else does he say about her? Carla asked, knowing she was hurting herself but unable to stop. Oh, all sorts of things, Laura said, waving a hand as she pulled a lipstick from her bag. Says she's stingy, won't give him money for a decent life. That she controls every euro. Says he can't have the things he wants because of her. I get it, what man wants to be under someone's thumb? Stingy? Carla earned more than Diego and had never restricted his spending. In fact, she regularly gave him money for personal expenses. She'd even taken out a loan recently to help him pay for professional development courses. And now he was spinning it as financial oppression. Jose, how much longer are we stuck here? Laura asked, clearly growing bored. They're clearing it now, the driver replied, pointing ahead. See, traffic's moving up there. We'll be going soon. And indeed, the lights ahead began to flicker and shift. Cars inched forward, slowly but steadily. Carla felt a wave of dread wash over her. The traffic jam was ending, which meant they'd soon reach the country house. Diego. The unbearable confrontation that now seemed more terrifying than anything. Is his wife pretty? Carla asked suddenly, not even knowing why she wanted to hear the answer. Who? Diego's wife? Laura scoffed. Please. Total plain Jane. Hair always in a bun, dresses like a nun. No makeup, no nails done. Just a typical housewife. He showed me a photo once. I couldn't believe he ever married someone like that. Must have been young and stupid. Carla instinctively looked down at her hands. A neat French manicure, done at the salon every 2 weeks. She glanced in the mirror. Light makeup, a well-kept hairstyle. Plain? A nun? Maybe in the photo he showed, she had been exhausted after work, not wearing makeup. Or maybe Diego had deliberately picked an unflattering picture to make himself look like the victim. Have they been married long? Carla asked, torturing herself further. 5 years, Laura said, applying mascara. He says he stopped loving her 3 years ago, but hasn't found the right moment to leave. She threatens to kill herself. Their families pressure him. It's the classic mess. 5 years. The same 5 years Carla and Diego had been married. 3 years since he stopped loving her. So all this time, while she was making plans for their future, dreaming of children, building their home, he had already stopped loving her. And she hadn't noticed? Or maybe she had, and just refused to see the truth? The car began to move, and the landscape outside came to life again. The rain was slowly easing, but the clouds still hung low and heavy, pressing down like a weight on everything below. Carla felt like she was underwater, everything muffled and distant, her own thoughts tangled and scattered. Show me a photo, Carla said unexpectedly, of your Diego. I'm just curious what such a romantic looks like. Laura smiled coquettishly and reached into her purse for her phone. Of course. Here, look, this is us at that restaurant I told you about. She handed the phone to Carla, and with one glance, Carla's last hopes crumbled. On the screen was her husband, her Diego, smiling, his arm wrapped around the red-haired beauty, looking at her with adoration, with a joy in his eyes that he used to have when he looked at Carla. Or maybe he never had. In the photo, he looked younger, lighter, as if he had thrown off a heavy burden. His face glowed with a happiness Carla hadn't seen in him for many months. So this was who made him feel truly alive. Handsome, isn't he? Laura said proudly, taking the phone back. And so thoughtful. Always remembers the little things. Just yesterday, he brought me my favorite chocolate. Said he was passing by the store and thought of me. Carla remembered that chocolate. Expensive Belgian, the kind Diego sometimes brought home. She had always assumed it was for her. But now it turned out it had been bought for his mistress and only afterward brought home, shared with the wife under the pretense of love. Excuse me, Carla muttered, nausea rising in her throat. I'm not feeling well. Could you open the window? Jose quickly cracked it open, letting in a gust of cool air carrying the scent of rain and damp earth. Carla inhaled it greedily, trying to steady herself against the wave of nausea and dizziness. Are you sure you're okay? Laura asked, for the first time noticing Carla's condition. Should we stop somewhere? Or get you some water? No, no, Carla replied quickly, wiping the sweat from her brow. Just carsick. It'll pass. She closed her eyes, trying to collect her thoughts. What was she going to do? What would she do when they arrived? Confront him? Throw the mistress out? Or pretend to know nothing? Maybe she should just turn around and leave, avoid the humiliation. But if she did that, Diego would never know his lies had been exposed. He'd go on living his double life, thinking his wife was a fool. You know, tomorrow is a special day for me and Diego, Laura chirped on, oblivious to her companion's torment. It's our 6-month anniversary. He promised to propose not officially, of course, but symbolically. He said he bought me a ring. A ring? Carla suddenly remembered how, just a month ago, Diego had asked her ring size, said he wanted to get her something special for their wedding anniversary. Was the ring not for her at all? Had he been thinking of his mistress even then, while speaking of a gift for his wife? Familiar sights began to appear outside, road signs and turns Carla knew by heart. The country house was close now, and she realized her time to decide was almost up. Very soon, she would be face to face with a truth no longer hidden behind pretty words and romantic illusions. The rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy, thick with the static of an approaching storm. Carla knew that storm would break very soon. The traffic jam dissolved as quickly as it had formed. Yellow and red turn signals flickered ahead, and the cars began to move again, picking up speed as they left the accident behind. Jose turned on his signal and smoothly merged with the flow of traffic, clearly relieved to be on the move. Well, thank God, he said with a sigh, glancing at the dashboard clock. Thought we'd be stuck there until evening. We'll be there in no time now. Carla remained silent, watching the passing scenery. Every kilometer brought her closer to the moment of reckoning, one she feared more and more. Her chest felt tight, as if a trapped bird were fluttering frantically inside. Her heart pounded fast and uneven, her breath catching now and then. Meanwhile, Laura pulled out her compact mirror and checked her makeup again. Her face glowed with anticipation, her eyes sparkling with happiness. She was clearly counting the minutes until she would be in her lover's arms. You know, I'm so nervous, she confessed, powdering her nose. Diego and I are planning something special for the weekend. He said he has a surprise for me. Isn't he the most romantic? Carla swallowed hard. A surprise? She wondered what it was. The surprise Diego had said he was preparing for her, just that morning? Or something entirely different, meant only for his mistress? What kind of surprise? She asked, surprised at how calm her voice sounded. No idea, Laura laughed. That bright laugh echoed in Carla's chest like a dagger, each note tightening the ache in her heart. He didn't say exactly, just hinted that I'd be thrilled. And he also promised to show me his country house. Said it's this cozy little place, far from all the city chaos. He goes there a lot to work when things get unbearable at home. The country house. Their house. The very one Carla had lovingly decorated, choosing every detail, creating a space for both of them to rest and recharge. So Diego had been taking his mistress there, showing her the fruits of Carla's labor and passing them off as his own? Did he describe it? Carla asked, her voice slightly hoarse, though she hoped Laura wouldn't notice. Oh, yes. He said there's a fireplace, a big terrace with mountain views, and a garden he planted it himself. Also a small pool in the yard, perfect for swimming. Sounds like paradise, Laura said dreamily. Every word felt like a stab. The fireplace, Carla had picked it out. The terrace, they had planned it together. The garden, she had planted it, with her own hands, the flowers, the shrubs. Even the pool, they had chosen it together, dreaming of summer swims. Carla bit her lip to keep from sobbing. It was excruciating to realize that everything she had poured her soul into, everything she had built to create a family home, now served as a backdrop for her husband's affair. He must be a very talented gardener, she managed to say. Oh, he is. Diego is such a multi-talented man. He's a great designer, and he's got golden hands. He says he loves making beauty with his own 2 hands. I just admire men like that so much. Laura clearly had no shortage of praise for her lover. Jose slowed the car. Ahead, Carla recognized a familiar turnoff. A sign read, Pinars, 5 kilometers. Her heart gave a jolt. They were so close. Does your Diego work a lot? Carla asked, trying to delay the inevitable. Of course. He's very responsible, only takes on serious projects. He often works late, especially when his wife's throwing tantrums at home. Then he prefers to sleep at the office or with friends. Friends. Carla remembered the nights Diego didn't come home, citing deadlines or saying he was crashing with a friend to avoid waking her with a late arrival. How considerate of him. In reality, he had been spending that time with Laura. Does he have many friends? Carla asked. Well, a few. He's picky about people. There's Mario, they've been friends since university. They still work together, always brainstorming projects. And there's Andres, also a designer. He lives in the neighborhood. Carla knew both Mario and Andres. She also knew that neither had worked with Diego for over a year. Mario had moved to another city, and Andres had opened his own studio. So Diego had been lying even about the small things, creating an entirely fictional world for his mistress. Outside, the landscape was growing more familiar. The pine trees thickened, the air grew fresher. Once, these views would have filled Carla with peace, the anticipation of a relaxing weekend. Now, each bend in the road brought her closer to the most painful moment of her life. Oh wow, it's beautiful here, Laura exclaimed, gazing out the window. Diego was right, it's the middle of nowhere. Perfect for romance. The middle of nowhere. Carla had once called these places quiet, secluded, peaceful. Now the word sounded ominous, a reminder that here, hidden from the world, betrayal had taken root. Are we far? Laura asked, leaning toward the driver's seat. About 3 kilometers, Jose replied. We're almost there. Carla felt her throat tighten. 3 kilometers. Maybe the most important 3 kilometers of her life. In that short stretch, she had to decide what to do. What would she do upon arrival? Confront Laura? Or keep pretending to be just a random fellow passenger? Inside her, emotions wrestled. On one hand, she wanted to scream the truth, to tell this smug girl everything, to show her that her precious Diego was a liar and a cheat. On the other hand, Carla understood that Laura was also a victim. She genuinely believed in love, had plans for the future, never realizing she was just a distraction for a married man. You know, Laura suddenly said, turning to Carla, I feel like I've seen you somewhere before. Your face looks really familiar. Carla's heart skipped a beat. Did Laura recognize her? Had Diego shown her photos of his wife? Or had they crossed paths somewhere by accident? I don't think so, Carla replied as calmly as she could. I'd remember a striking woman like you. Maybe I'm just imagining it, Laura shrugged. You know those moments of déjà vu? Like you've lived through something before. Carla said nothing, but everything inside her tightened. What if it wasn't déjà vu? What if Diego really had told Laura more about his wife than she imagined? What if he had shown her pictures, complained in more detail? The road dipped, and soon the first houses of the village of Pinars came into view. Carla knew every bend in this road, every house, every fence. How many times had she driven here with a joyful heart, eager to reunite with her husband? But now, the same familiar scenery looked like the set of a horror film. Well, here we are back to civilization, Jose smiled. Where to now, ladies? I need to go to Alcanoak Street, Laura said quickly. There's a house with blue shutters and big gates. Diego said he'd meet me by the gate. Alcanoak Street, blue shutters, big gates. Carla felt the blood drain from her face. That was a description of their house, the very house she was heading to spend a romantic weekend with her husband. And you? The driver asked Carla. Carla hesitated. She couldn't say she was going to the same place. It would raise questions she couldn't answer. But making up another address in such a small village was no easy task. Me, I need to go a bit farther, she mumbled. To a friend's. Same street, just the other end. All right then, we'll drop this young lady off first, then head to your stop, Jose nodded. The car turned onto a street Carla knew intimately. Country plots lined both sides, lush and green. A dog barked somewhere, an axe chopped with nearby ordinary countryside sounds that once calmed Carla, but now felt ominous. Oh, there he is, Laura suddenly exclaimed, pointing at the familiar figure near the gate. Carla looked in that direction and saw Diego, her husband. He was standing by the gate of their house, clearly waiting for Laura. He was wearing the shirt Carla had given him for his birthday, saying it brought out the color of his eyes. Now, he had chosen it to greet his lover. Diego looked excited, impatient. He kept checking his watch, peering down the road. When he saw the taxi approaching, his face lit up with a smile, the same smile Carla once believed was meant only for her. Stop here, please, Laura told the driver. Jose pulled over, and Laura began gathering her things. Diego was already walking toward the car, and with every step, Carla sank deeper into her seat, hoping to remain unseen. All right, ladies, we're here, the driver announced. Thanks for the ride, Laura said cheerfully to Carla. It was nice chatting. Have a great weekend. You too, Carla whispered, barely audible, without lifting her eyes. Laura got out of the car, and Carla saw Diego embrace her, kiss her on the lips, pull her close. The same gestures he always used to welcome Carla. The same tender moves, the same passion in his arms. But now, it was for another woman. I missed you, baby, Carla heard Diego say through the slightly open window. I missed you too. I couldn't think about anything else, Laura replied, and they kissed again. Carla closed her eyes, unable to watch another second, but the sound still pierced her, tearing her heart to pieces. So, where to now? Jose asked, once the lovers had disappeared behind the gate. Carla opened her eyes and stared at the gate that had just closed behind her husband and his mistress. What now? Should she keep going, pretending nothing happened? Or, you know what? She suddenly said, and there was a firmness in her voice that surprised even herself. Take me back to the city. My plans have changed. Back to the city? The driver asked, puzzled. What about your friend? She canceled on me, Carla lied. Just texted me. So let's head back. Jose shrugged and turned the car around. Carla leaned back in her seat, feeling a strange sense of relief. She wasn't ready to face him. Not yet. She needed time to process everything she had heard, to decide what to do. But after a few kilometers, Carla suddenly realized she was running away. Avoiding, not confronting. Was she really willing to live in ignorance? Could she allow Diego to keep lying to her? Stop the car, Carla said to Jose. What happened? I've changed my mind. Please take me back to those gates. Turns out I do have some business there. The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror, visibly skeptical. Miss, make up your mind. I can't be driving back and forth all day. I'm sorry, Carla said, taking out some money from her wallet. This is for the trouble, but I really need to go back. Jose accepted the money, shook his head, and turned the car around. Half an hour later, they were once again parked in front of the familiar gate. Carla got out, paid the driver, and was left alone on the quiet country road. The taxi drove away, leaving behind a cloud of dust. Carla stood in front of the gate to her house, knowing that the most important conversation of her life lay ahead, one that would change everything. She approached and noticed that the gates weren't locked, just left ajar. Inside, she could hear voices, laughter. Her husband and his lover had made themselves at home in her home, surrounded by things she had chosen and bought. Carla pushed the gate open and stepped inside. The path she had laid with her own hands led toward the house, where the scene of her personal nightmare was unfolding. But she was ready to walk that path whatever waited at the end. She stood by the gate, her heart pounding up in her throat. The familiar walkway stretched ahead, winding to the house where Diego and Laura were now. She could hear them carefree, happy, speaking with the kind of intimacy that had once belonged to her. Well then, she whispered to herself, time to find out the truth. But instead of storming in and shouting accusations, Carla did something unexpected even to herself. She turned around and began walking back down the street. She needed time to think, to decide exactly how she wanted to act. Throw a tantrum? Kick the mistress out? Or, was there a better way? In the neighboring yard, an elderly man was tending his vegetable patch. When he saw Carla, he waved warmly. Afternoon. Visiting someone? He asked, brushing soil from his hands. Yes, the neighbors, Carla said, pointing toward the house with the blue shutters. But I thought I'd stop by the shop first. Can't show up empty-handed, after all. Ah, makes sense. The store is just around the bend. But be quick, they close at 6. Carla thanked him and headed for the shop, reflecting on everything that had happened. Fate had brought her face to face with her husband's mistress in the most improbable way. But now she had an advantage. She knew who Laura was, while Laura had no idea who she was. At the small village store, Carla bought a bottle of good wine, some cheese, chocolates, everything one might bring as a polite guest. In those 30 minutes, she finalized her plan. No drama, no tears. She would show both Diego and his lover who really held the upper hand here. Returning to the house, Carla walked up to the door and rang the bell with quiet resolve. A few seconds later, footsteps sounded, and the door opened. There stood Diego in the same shirt she had gifted him for his birthday. When he saw her, he went pale, as if he'd seen a ghost. Carla? He breathed, a note of pure panic in his voice. You, what are you doing here? Hello, darling, Carla said with warmth so natural it stunned even her. Thought I'd surprise you. I got off work early and figured I'd drop by to see my husband. Diego stood frozen in the doorway, completely at a loss. His face showed nothing but confusion, his eyes darting around like a trapped animal. But I thought you were at work. You didn't say anything, he stammered, trying to gather his thoughts. Who's that? Came Laura's bright voice as she appeared behind him. She stopped abruptly when she saw Carla. A flicker crossed her face, surprise, maybe recognition, maybe just curiosity. This is... Diego began, but Carla cut him off. Carla, she said, extending her hand to Laura. Diego's wife. And you must be the taxi companion? Laura stared at the outstretched hand, then at Diego, then back at Carla. Taxi companion? She repeated, her voice weakening. Yes, of course, Carla continued calmly. The driver told me he dropped off a young lady at our place. Said she was very sweet and talkative. Sounds like you. Diego stood between them, opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. His face had taken on a grayish tone, and beads of sweat had appeared on his forehead. Diego, aren't you going to invite us in? Carla asked gently. Or shall we keep standing on the doorstep? Yes, of course, come in, he mumbled, stepping aside. Carla walked into the house and looked around. Everything was exactly as she had left it, cozy, clean, homey. On the table were 2 glasses and a plate of tapas. Clearly, preparations for a romantic evening. What a lovely house, Laura said, still in shock. Diego, you never said your wife comes here too. And why shouldn't I come to my own house? Carla asked with a pleasant smile, placing the bag of groceries on the table. A heavy silence fell. Diego nervously adjusted his shirt, Laura fidgeted with her handbag, while Carla, by contrast, felt perfectly calm. Strangely, being aware of the situation and being in control gave her confidence. So, shall we have some coffee? She offered, heading to the kitchen. Laura, right? Diego, why don't you introduce us properly? Yes, I'm Laura, the girl whispered, her eyes fixed on Carla. Pleasure to meet you, Carla said sincerely. We rarely get visitors out here. Such a surprise. Diego made a strange choking sound, like a stifled cough. He was clearly trying to say something but couldn't form the words. Darling, you look a bit pale, Carla said sweetly. Are you feeling all right? Catching a cold, maybe? No, I'm fine, Diego finally managed to mutter. Carla busied herself in the kitchen, taking out beautiful cups, slicing the cheese she'd bought, arranging the chocolates. Her movements were calm and deliberate, as if she were simply preparing for a casual visit with friends. So, Laura, how did you meet my husband? She asked without turning around. Was it work-related? Laura threw a desperate glance at Diego, but he stared at the floor, clearly not coming to her rescue. Yes, through work, she replied hesitantly. How interesting. And what field are you in? In interior design, Laura lied, clearly deciding to stick to Diego's version of the story. Oh, really? Then you must like our house. I decorated everything myself, Carla said proudly, setting the coffee pot on the table. Laura glanced around, and Carla could see the realization dawning on her face. The girl was starting to understand she'd walked into a very awkward situation. It's very beautiful, Laura mumbled. Thank you. You know, I have an idea, Carla said suddenly. Since you're already here, why not stay for dinner? Maybe even overnight? I was just planning to cook something special. Diego nearly choked on his coffee. Carla, I don't think that's a good idea, he began, but she cut him off. Why not? Laura must be tired after the trip. And the weather is so unpredictable. We have a guest room. No, Laura waved her hands quickly. I don't want to intrude. I really should be going. Where will you go at this hour? Carla asked, feigning surprise. There are no buses now, and you won't find a taxi out here. Please, don't be shy. Inside, Carla was jubilant. She could see how Diego was squirming, how flustered Laura had become. Her plan was working perfectly. Carla's right, Diego said unexpectedly, and there was a note of hopelessness in his voice. Getting back from here right now would be difficult. Carla looked at her husband in surprise. Was he really planning to keep up the act? Or did he simply see no other way out? Wonderful. Carla clapped her hands. Then tonight we'll have a proper family evening. Laura, tell us about yourself. Do you have any family? No, Laura answered quietly, sinking deeper into the armchair. Are you planning to start one? Thinking about marriage? Laura glanced at Diego, who was staring out the window as if something incredibly fascinating were happening outside. I don't know yet, she whispered barely audibly. You know, I could tell right away that you're a special woman, Carla said confidentially, sitting next to her. You have such a striking appearance, such style. Diego, don't you think Laura is very beautiful? Diego made an indistinct, strangled sound. My husband has always appreciated beauty, Carla continued. Isn't that right, darling? Remember how you used to say that life should be surrounded by beautiful things? I remember, Diego answered hoarsely. Carla stood and walked over to the fireplace where several photos stood. She picked one up, their wedding photo. Look, Laura. This was us 5 years ago, on our wedding day. We were so young and happy. Laura took the photo with trembling hands. Carla could see how she studied Diego's face in the picture, comparing it to the man she thought she knew. Beautiful couple, Laura whispered, handing the photo back. Yes, we've always been very happy in our marriage, Carla said dreamily. Though lately, Diego's been traveling a lot for work. But I understand career is important. Still, I must admit, I do miss him sometimes. She looked at her husband with such love and longing that Laura instinctively lowered her eyes. Have you known your husband long? Laura asked quietly. 7 years. We dated for 2, and we've been married for 5. Time flies, doesn't it? Carla returned to the table. You know what I like most about him? She said. He's so honest, so open. He never lies, never hides anything. I trust him completely. Diego flinched as if struck. Trust is the foundation of a marriage, Carla added. Without it, no relationship can survive. Don't you agree, Laura? Yes, Laura whispered faintly. Outside, evening was falling. The street lamps came on, and the house sank into a cozy twilight. Carla lit a table lamp, casting a soft glow over the faces gathered at the table. You know, Laura, why don't you tell us something interesting about yourself? Carla offered. Any hobbies? Passions? I like reading, Laura replied, clearly trying to avoid details. How lovely. What do you prefer? Classics? Modern fiction? A bit of both, Laura answered briefly. Carla noticed how Laura kept glancing toward the door, as if looking for an escape route. But Carla wasn't planning to let her off the hook so easily. You know, Diego loves reading too, she said, especially in the evenings, before bed. We even have a tradition reading to each other aloud. Right, darling? Diego nodded without lifting his gaze. Maybe we could all read something tonight, Carla suggested. I have a beautiful book of poetry right here. I should go, Laura said suddenly, jumping to her feet. I don't want to intrude on your family evening. Where could you possibly go? Carla said in surprise. It's already dark outside, and this place is unfamiliar. No, I won't let you leave. Laura glanced at Diego with a pleading look, but he just sat there, staring down at the table. Then, maybe you could show me where I can spend the night? She asked quietly. Of course. Come, I'll show you the guest room, Carla replied cheerfully. She led Laura to a small room upstairs, brought in fresh linens and towels. The whole time, Laura remained silent, occasionally casting strange, uncertain glances at Carla. Good night, Laura, Carla said as she closed the door. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. When she returned to the living room, Diego was in the same position, still sitting at the table with his head in his hands. Well, darling, Carla said, sitting across from him. Didn't expect the evening to turn out this way, did you? Diego lifted his head and looked at his wife. His eyes were filled with fear, shame, and a kind of hopelessness. Carla, I can explain, he began. Explain what? She asked innocently. How kindly you care for random taxi companions. That's so noble of you. Diego realized the game was over. The house fell into silence, broken only by the ticking of the old wall clock and the distant rustle of wind in the pines. He sat at the table, head bowed, as if the weight of the world had landed on his shoulders. Carla watched him, and strangely enough, instead of triumph, she felt only emptiness. Outside, the first rays of dawn were piercing through the tree branches, casting a soft golden glow across the room. In the distance, a rooster crowed. Life outside continued, indifferent to the personal drama unfolding behind closed doors. Carla, Diego whispered at last, not lifting his eyes. I don't know what to say. What is there to say? She replied calmly, clearing the cups from the table. You thought no one would ever find out, but life had other plans. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Laura must not have been asleep, likely listening to everything happening below. Carla could only imagine what the girl was going through. Her perfect fairy tale had collapsed in one night, turning into a sordid story of betrayal. How long have you known? Diego asked quietly. Since today, Carla replied, setting the dishes in the sink. Can you believe it? Your lover just happened to be my fellow passenger. She spoke so sweetly about her boyfriend. All the gifts you gave her with my money. All the restaurants you took her to, presenting them as romantic discoveries. Diego flinched, as if every word struck him across the face. His hands trembled as he reached for a glass of water. Carla, Please, let me explain. Explain what? She turned to him, her eyes void of anger or tears, only cold clarity. That you told her I was boring and sick? That I control every euro? That I'd threaten suicide if you left me? Diego went even paler. Carla saw the sweat bead on his forehead. I never said. You did, she interrupted firmly. You said it all. And you know what's saddest? She believed you. She genuinely believed you were a poor, trapped husband. She was building dreams of a future with you. Silence stretched between them. Carla sat down across from him and looked him in the eyes. This was the man she had shared a bed with for 5 years. She knew every freckle on his body, every little habit. And now, he felt like a stranger. Do you remember our first anniversary? She asked suddenly. You gave me a ring with a tiny diamond. You said one day you'd buy me a real one, a big one. I told you then I didn't want a big one. I wanted an honest one. Diego winced, as if from physical pain. I remember. Back then, I really did want to be honest. And when did you stop? Can you name the exact moment? Diego was silent for a long time, sorting through memories. His gaze wandered around the room, lingering on familiar objects they had once chosen together. Probably when you started talking about children. When you began planning our life years ahead. I started to feel like I was suffocating in those plans. And instead of talking to me, you decided to find an escape on the side? Yes. That was cruel, Carla nodded, acknowledging his honesty. Do you love her? She asked suddenly. Diego was caught off guard by the question. Me? I don't know. Probably not. Was it just a fling? No. I mean, at first yes. But then I got confused. She was so enthusiastic, so eager to idolize me. With her, I felt like a hero, not a failure. Carla nodded as if she had received the answer she expected. Did you ever really love me? Diego looked up at her, and in his eyes she saw pain, genuine pain, not feigned. I did. Very much. In the beginning. And then? Then? I don't know. Maybe it was habit. Convenience. You were always there, always supportive. I took it for granted. Then I started seeing it as a burden. At least he was being honest. Carla appreciated that. You know, Diego, I could have made a scene. Thrown her out in the middle of the night, screamed, cried, made threats. But you know what? I don't want to fight for you anymore. The word struck like a sentence. Diego flinched, as if he'd been slapped. Carla, we can fix this. I'll end things with her. We can start over. No, Carla shook her head. You can't rebuild something that's rotten at the foundation. I won't live my life constantly suspicious, checking your phone, looking for signs. That's not life, that's a prison. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked again, louder this time. Carla stood up. I'm going to talk to Laura. She's hurting too. Carla, don't, Diego began, but she was already walking toward the stairs. On the second floor, Carla knocked on the guest room door. Laura, may I come in? There was no response, but the door was unlocked. Carla entered and saw the girl sitting on the edge of the bed. Laura wasn't crying, but she looked completely broken. Her once vibrant makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled, and her eyes held the same emptiness Carla felt inside. How long have you known? Laura asked quietly, not looking up. Since we met in the taxi, Carla replied honestly, sitting beside her. You spoke in great detail about your beloved. Laura gave a bitter chuckle. So all that time you knew who I was? And you still invited me into your home? Yes. Why? Carla paused. Why, indeed? Out of revenge? Curiosity? Or maybe pity for the deceived young woman sitting beside her? Maybe because I wanted to understand what was so special about you? What made my husband willing to destroy our family for you? And did you understand? You're young, beautiful, carefree. You don't carry the same tiredness I do. You don't nag him about dirty dishes or remind him of family duties. You're ready to admire him just for existing. Laura finally looked up and met Carla's gaze. I didn't know he was married. I did, but he said. That I was a monster poisoning his life? Yes, Laura whispered. I'm sorry. For what? For believing the fairy tale. If I were in your place, I probably would have believed it too. Outside, the sky was getting lighter. Birds were beginning their morning concert, and those simple sounds of life suddenly felt incredibly meaningful to Carla. Do you know what's the scariest part? Laura said, staring out at the dawn sky. I felt something was wrong. He never invited me to his place. We always met somewhere neutral. He told me he was renting a flat with a roommate, and when I suggested meeting his friends, he always had some excuse. Why didn't you listen to your intuition? Because I wanted to believe. He knew how to say the right things, gave me gifts, was attentive, and above all, he seemed so miserable in his marriage. I wanted to save him. Carla nodded in understanding. Men who want to deceive us are very good at learning what we want to hear. Diego knew you were kind and compassionate. That's why he invented a story about a miserable marriage. They sat in silence, two women deceived by the same man, each in her own way, but hurt just the same. What happens now? Laura asked. Now we both start over, Carla said with a certainty that surprised even herself. You're young, you've got everything ahead of you. And me? I'll finally let go of my illusions. And what if he chooses me? Laura asked suddenly. Carla looked at her closely. Do you even want that? After everything you've learned? Are you willing to be with someone who lied to you for 6 months and to me for 5 years? Laura lowered her head. No, probably not. I could never trust him again. Then what difference does it make who he chooses? But how do you move on? How do you trust and love again? Carla gently took Laura's hand. Carefully, thoughtfully, with trust but with your eyes open. And remember, a man who truly loves you will never hide your existence from the world. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking through. The long night was coming to an end. And with it, one story was ending, making room for others to begin. You know, Laura, Carla said, in some ways, you and I are alike. We both wanted to love and be loved. We just chose the wrong man. Do you think there are men out there worth choosing? Absolutely. Men who don't lie about the small things and don't cheat about the big ones. Who don't badmouth their wives to their lovers or make promises they never intended to keep. Laura nodded, and for the first time that night, a flicker of hope appeared in her eyes. I should go, she said, standing up. Everything seems simpler in the morning. Where will you go? Home. Back to the city. I'm going to start over. They went downstairs. Diego was still sitting where Carla had left him. He looked as if he had aged several years overnight. I'm leaving, Laura said, without looking at him. Laura, wait, he began, standing up, but she shook her head. Don't. Everything's already been said. Diego took a step toward her, but Laura stepped back. I'll call a cab, she said. At this hour, you won't find one, Carla noted. I'll drive you. But your car's broken, Diego said in surprise. Yours still works, Carla replied calmly. Keys. Hand them over. Diego silently handed her the keys. His hands were trembling. The drive back to the city passed in silence. Laura stared out the window at the waking world, while Carla thought about how quickly life could change. Just yesterday, she was a happy woman planning a romantic weekend with her husband. And today, she was free but alone. Strangely, the solitude didn't scare her. On the contrary, there was something liberating in it. Carla, Laura suddenly said as they approached the city, thank you. For what? For not stooping to drama. For treating me like a human being. We're both victims, Laura. What's the point in victims turning on each other? Carla dropped the girl off at her apartment and drove home. The first thing she did was pack Diego's things into a suitcase carefully, without anger, just as a necessary step. Each item reminded her of a moment they'd shared, but Carla no longer felt pain, only the fatigue of being deceived. Diego showed up that evening, sullen and confused. Your things are on the bed, Carla said, without looking up from the TV. Carla, can we talk? About what? I've filed for divorce. The lawyer said that if we both agree, it'll be quick. The country house stays with me. I bought it with my money, and it's in my name. And the apartment? Also mine. You remember that, don't you? Diego stood in the middle of the room with the suitcase in his hand, and Carla suddenly realized she felt no anger or hatred toward him, just exhaustion and relief. Carla, I know you're angry, but maybe in time. Diego, Carla interrupted, finally looking him in the eye. You're a good man. Just a weak one. We're not meant to walk the same path anymore. At the lawyer's office, Carla felt surprisingly calm. Carmen, an older woman with sharp eyes, studied the documents carefully. The assets are mostly yours, no children, no alimony required, the lawyer summarized. One of the simplest cases I've seen. Just one question, are you sure about your decision? Men often change their minds when they realize what they're losing. I'm not losing anything, Carla replied firmly. I'm gaining freedom from lies, from the pressure to be convenient, from the fear of being disappointed again. A wise position, the lawyer nodded approvingly. I wish I saw more women like you in my practice. At the country house, renovations were in full swing. Carla had decided to turn the large living room into an art studio. She had always dreamed of painting but never found the time. Now she had plenty. Workers were tearing down the wall between the kitchen and the living room, creating an open space. Carla stood amid the construction dust and felt that, along with the old walls, her old life was also crumbling. "Ma'am, what should we do with these photos?" the foreman asked, pointing to wedding pictures. "Put them in a box," Carla replied. "I don't need them anymore." 3 months later, Carla was sitting in her favorite cafe reading a book. At the next table, a group of young people were loudly discussing a movie. Their carefree laughter reminded her of Laura. The girl still wrote from time to time. She'd changed jobs, moved to a new neighborhood, met someone interesting. Her messages were brief, but Carla could sense that things were getting better. As for Diego, Carla had heard he was renting a room in a small apartment and looking for a new job. He never tried to contact Laura again. Apparently, he understood the bridges were burned. Carla finished her coffee and opened her planner. Tomorrow, she had a meeting with a designer. She decided to completely remodel the country house, turn it into a space for creativity and rest. Just for herself. Her phone rang in her pocket. An unknown number. "Hello, Carla? This is Mario, Diego's friend. We met at the birthday party 2 years ago." "I remember. I'm listening." Mario really was different from Diego. Carla recalled their meeting back then. He had seemed interesting but out of reach. She was married and didn't consider other men. But now she saw him with different eyes. "I heard you and Diego divorced. I'm really sorry." "Thank you for your concern, but I'm not sorry at all." Mario laughed. "You know, I always wondered how Diego managed to win you over," he said. "You always seemed to me like someone out of his league." "Maybe I really was," Carla replied. "I just didn't realize it at the time." "And now you do?" Carla paused, thinking it over. "Now I know my worth, and I know I won't settle for less than I deserve." "And what do you deserve?" "Honesty, respect, and love that doesn't ask me to become someone else." "You know," Mario said, "if it's not too forward, may I invite you to dinner? Just as a friend who wants to be there during a tough time." Carla thought for a moment. Mario truly was a pleasant man, smart, successful, with a sense of humor, and most importantly available. "You may," she said, "but only if you don't pity me. I'm not a victim of circumstance. I'm a woman who's been given a second chance." "That's exactly why I'm calling," Mario replied. Mario smiled, and Carla realized that this conversation was already a good beginning. She closed her book and looked out the window. It was spring outside, trees were budding with new green, people were walking around with light smiles. Life was moving on, and it was beautiful. She was no longer someone's wife, no longer betrayed or abandoned. She was simply Carla with her own plans, her dreams, and the right to make mistakes. And the right to fall in love again, when the time was right. 6 months later, in the same cafe, Carla ran into Laura by chance. The girl had changed, she seemed calmer, more self-assured. Sitting next to her was a young man who looked at her with genuine adoration. "Carla." Laura lit up. "How are you? You look amazing." "Thank you. You too," Carla replied sincerely. They chatted for a while, and Carla saw that Laura truly was happy. Her new partner turned out to be honest, open, and had already introduced her to all his friends and family. "And how's Diego?" Laura asked quietly. "I don't know," Carla shrugged. "And I don't care." "Good," Laura nodded. Some people are better left in the past. And time Carla could feel it had truly come. It had brought not only new love, but a new version of herself, strong, independent, and aware of her worth. A woman she had always had the potential to be but never dared to become. What do you think? Did Carla make the right choice? Or should she have stayed and endured? Share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.